Apart from activity, the AndroidManifest file may also include other components. These are services, that is, components whose task is to run various operations in the background without the user interface. We also have receivers, components whose task is to receive the messages sent between components. The last group are providers, which make certain data available outside the application. Each of these components is in a way a main application component in Android and must be defined inside the AndroidManifest file in order to be used. Apart from defining components inside AndroidManifest, we may also specify the type of permissions required by our application. The Android permission model assumes that all the elements considered potentially dangerous must be specified as explicit by the manifest. This means that the application is not able to use anything which is not defined by the manifest. If our application needs, for instance, access to the Internet, we must add uses permission Internet. It informs the system about the required permissions. Permissions are required from the user. This means that during the installation, the user receives the list of all permissions required by the application and has to agree that the application can use them. It is an all-or-nothing approach. If we want to launch the application, we must agree to all permissions. There is no possibility of a selective disabling of certain permissions. The table below presents the list of the most popular permissions. The address provided on the slide includes a full list of permissions with their descriptions. The most important permissions used are the location permissions. There are two of them, \_course_location and access_fine_location. Depending on the level of detail we need, we have to choose the relevant option. Course is the least accurate means of localization. Usually, it's the localization obtained from GSM and Wi-Fi. Fine is based predominantly on GPS and additionally on Wi-Fi data. This way, we can determine the user location with a much greater accuracy. We also obtain information about the connection status, that is, whether the user is connected to any network, for instance via 3G or Wi-Fi. This way, we get to know whether the user has Internet access and what type of access it is. If it's not a constant access, we can, for instance, ban the download of large files. Call_phone is a particularly unsafe permission. It makes it possible to make any telephone call without the user's knowledge. It may happen that without the knowledge of the user, a phone calls a certain number on its own. It's used particularly in the case of various Trojan applications. This particular permission is actually fairly well checked by the users. Usually, we would have to have good reason to use it. Another permission is camera. It grants access to a photo camera or a video camera. This way, we are able to get images from the device. Again, the issue of privacy arises. So it should come as no surprise that the users are very careful about it. Another permission is permission internet. It is a required permission in most cases, so users are rather used to it. Obviously, there may be solutions that we, for instance, have a calculator-like application which requires internet access. The user might wonder why. Usually, it's needed because the application publishes some advertisements or connects with analytics modules. In such cases, it's good to explain to the user what we need the specific permission for. The last two permissions are pretty serious. They concern receiving and sending text messages. Here, we have full access to the user text message box. This means that we can read all messages as well as send them. However, there's a problem here, because our application might send premium text messages, which are pretty expensive. That is why it's good to explain to the user why is it that we need to send text messages.